Hi all, Helen here. This week we look at the conservative philosopher and sometime tobacco lobbyist Roger Scruton. This episode felt like a real return to form for the podcast, as we discuss a man who seems to have spent his whole career churning out shallow and lazy bigotry, motivated largely by his own narcissism and sense of grievance. I hope you enjoy listening to it as much as we enjoyed recording it.
There's really nothing real. There is no real. And that's what's called the postmodern mentality.
I couldn't resist the worst racist remark.
The adventure of life justifies its suffering.
I don't want to see him having political succubus with goblins.
We'll do it live.
Okay. Is Trump going to have babies with a goblin?
We'll do it live.
And turn against us like Darth Vader?
Do it live.
Now listen, you
the right of calling
I'll
names
you in
and
your
let's get-
goddamn face, and you'll stay plastered.
I was going to have a guest speaker, but the person I had invited in died.
Some level of masochism.
This is Helen.
This is Sarah,
Welcome to Odium Symposium.
a podcast about the production of bigotry.
Just want to remind you, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/Odium Symposium for $5 a month.
We'll read your message on the show, you'll get early access to episodes, and we're going to continue to produce connoisseur-only episodes from time to time, although mostly you're just being nice to us. You can also find something new, Odium Symposium mugs and other merch at www.odiumsymposium.com. It's going to be designed by Quinny, who does our episode art. Links to all this in the description.
Also, listeners are welcome to join our Discord. You can find a link for that in the description as well. Okay. I guess we'll just jump right into the episode topic. What do you know about Roger Scruton?
He's a conservative, philosopher or political theorist? I don't know much more about him than that, I think.
Yeah, so he's a philosopher, I would say, is a fair description. When I first started brainstorming episode topics, he's been on the list for a while. Obviously, we'll get into more details, but in a lot of ways, he's kind of a British version of William F. Buckley. So he's someone who provided sort of an intellectual basis for conservatism.
Okay.
So that's just to give you a very vague overview to hold on to as we dive into this.
Okay, I'm expecting an incredibly annoying and fussy little crypto-fascist.
Yeah, so he was born in 1944. Roger Vernon Scruton.
Okay.
He's technically Sir Roger Scruton. He was knighted in 2016.
Ooh, Sir Roger Scruton.
Exactly.
Dude, it's one of the most annoying, liberal affectations when you name a celebrity and they're like, oh, don't you mean Sir Ian or some shit like that? Shut the fuck up, man. I don't respect that stuff.
Yeah, so he was knighted for services to philosophy, teaching, and public education in 2016.
Okay. I believe Kathleen Stock is also. So, yeah, this doesn't have a lot of... I don't put a lot of respect on that stuff.
Yeah, so he got a scholarship at Cambridge, studied philosophy, and when he got to Cambridge, he said that he felt, quote, socially estranged, but spiritually at home.
What does that mean?
Yeah, so he didn't come from, a really well-off background, so it wasn't he had, he wasn't Sir Roger Scruton because he grew up with a title and, this really wealthy family.
Uh-huh.
So, basically, he was, a working-class kid at Cambridge, and so was definitely ostracized on that basis, but he was enough of a weird crypto-fascist freak that he loved the concept of Cambridge.
Okay, he loved the heritage, he loved the history, he loved the exclusion.
So he was a philosopher, but mostly he was just a really prolific writer of popular philosophy books. His focuses were aesthetics, political philosophy, and what it means to be a conservative.
This is a question I've heard you wrestle with before, actually.
What does it mean to be a conservative?
Yeah, I think it's a genuine question.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what his answer is. It's not great. Wading through he wrote over 50 books. So there was no way that I was going to be able to read everything he wrote and distill it down into an episode. So I kind of needed to find something that was going to be our main path through the episode. In 2014, he wrote a book called How to Be a Conservative. He's done a couple of these throughout the years, in the 80s or late 70s rather. He wrote a book called The Meaning of Conservatism. So he's always writing these kind of manifesto-ish books. But this one felt like a good thing to focus on. So here's let's just take a look at the chapter titles. I'm going to have you read these and you'll get a sense of like what's ahead of us.
Preface. My journey. Starting from home. The truth in nationalism. The truth in socialism. The truth in capitalism. The truth in liberalism. The truth in multiculturalism. The truth in environmentalism. The truth in internationalism. The truth in conservatism. Realms of value. Practical matters. A valediction forbidding mourning but admitting loss.
Okay, so what vibe do you already get from these chapter titles?
Well, I mean, first off, super pretentious.
Oh, extremely.
Second, it seems like he's going to say something about how, like, you can draw truth from all of these philosophies.
Yeah.
But, like, he put the truth in conservatism last for a reason. I think that's
absolutely.
like our ultimate destination. We're going to be like, now, socialism recognizes that actually we should try and make lots of people happy, but it does it through a destitution of the human spirit and a forbidding of freedom, which cannot be allowed. And then, you know, in conservatism, we're going to get the synthesis of all this.
Exactly. I mean, it's almost like we just don't have to do the episode now, except there actually are a couple twists in here that I think are sort of interesting to take a look at. I was surprised by some of this book. None of it was surprising in the way of like making me have more respect for him coming out of it than I went in. I had far less respect for him, which was already at 0 when I started reading the book. So, but I also thought this is a good one because he starts with a little bit of a biography, which I did have to supplement reading other sources because his own version of his biography is also highly biased. But we're just going to launch right in, and my journey is his life, so we'll get a little bit of what's his background is there. So, okay, the preface is just like pretty bog standard what you'd expect. Freedom is under threat. Values are in decline. The modern world is destroying everything of value, and conservatism is the only rational response. So let's look at what conservatism is and learn why. Nothing really worth excerpting out of it. Here's how he opens my journey.
It is not unusual to be a conservative, but it is unusual to be an intellectual conservative. In both Britain and America, some 70% of academics identify themselves as on the left, while the surrounding culture is increasingly hostile to traditional values, or to any claim that might be made for the high achievements of Western civilization. Ordinary conservatives, and many, possibly most people fall into this category, are constantly told that their ideas and sentiments are reactionary, prejudiced, sexist, or racist. Just by being the thing they are... okay. Does he happen to mean reactionary, prejudiced, sexist, and racist? I kind of suspect so.
Yes.
Just by being the thing they are, they offend against the new norms of inclusiveness and non-discrimination. Their honest attempts to live by their lights, raising families, enjoying communities, worshiping their gods, and adopting a settled and affirmative culture. These attempts are scorned and ridiculed by the guardian class. In intellectual circles, conservatives therefore move quietly and discreetly, catching each other's eyes across the room like the homosexuals in Proust, whom that great writer compared to Homer's gods, known only to each other as they move in disguise around the world of mortals. I did not see that passage coming. We, the supposed excluders, are therefore under pressure to hide what we are, for fear of being excluded. I have resisted that pressure, and as a result, my life has been far more interesting than I ever intended it to be.
Yeah, so there was a preface, but this is like the opening of the book, of like the book proper, and there's so much packed in here, right?
Oh yeah,
like
there's so much here.
First of all, this claim that like most people are conservatives, right? Like
dubious at best.
But it needs to be married with this sense of martyrdom and victimization.
Absolutely.
So, you know, oh, most people are conservatives, but the intellectuals are all, you know, crazy liberals or crazy socialists. And so
Notice that nowhere in here does the anti-intellectualism of conservatism as a movement, as a social tendency, like, come into play. Instead, intellectuals are just like hostile to conservatism through, I don't know, just pure snottiness or something. Whereas now, like, they're actually in power, and just as when they've been in power in the past, but even more severely now, the first thing they do is they fucking crack down on these leftist intellectuals, these pinko commie scum, these Jewish crypto communists.
yeah.
Like,
And then moving on from that, this thing about the homosexuals in Proust is so funny because he just, like, the reason Proust writes about homosexuals, like, having this kind of secrecy and catching each other's eyes across rooms is because
because
that's
of
just,
guys like this.
but also, like, that's just how gay people are and, like, were because of this oppression. And so it's funny to be like, gay people, like, from the novels of Proust, when really you just mean gay people such as existing gay people. But if you had admitted that that was just, like, a real world phenomenon, it would challenge your sense of martyrdom because you're writing this at I don't know, it's so crazy to be like, oh, gay people, like in the Proust novel. Like, it's just so... It tells you, like, the world he comes from and what he thinks of as real, right? Gay people aren't real, but the novels of Proust are real. Okay, but homosexuals exist in that world.
It's very clear already from this that this is not actually a letter to centrists.
No.
This is for conservatives who are just, like, sick of the sense that they're being called out for their bigotry.
Yeah. Then he talks about his upbringing. His father was a Marxist.
Okay.
Like, working class, involved in union politics, it seems.
This guy's a failed Mamdani.
Yeah.
For politics, in Jack Scruton's eyes, was the pursuit of class war by other means.
Jack Scruton is his father.
Thanks to the unions and the Labour Party, he believed the working class had begun to drive the upper classes into the corner from where they would be forced to deliver up their stolen assets. The major obstacle to this cherished outcome was the Conservative Party, which was an establishment of big business, property developers, and landed aristocrats who were hoping to sell the inheritance of the British people to the highest bidder and then move to the Bahamas. Jack regarded himself as locked in a lifelong struggle with this establishment, on behalf of the Anglo-Saxon peasantry whose birthright had been stolen 1,000 years earlier by the Norman Knights. He believed in socialism not as an economic doctrine, but as a restoration to the common people of the land that was theirs. Okay, so Jack started off sounding, I don't know, pretty based, but then we're getting to, like, this proper English blood stuff.
I'm not sure how much of this is, like, Roger Scruton needing to reconcile that his father was a communist with the fact that he needs his father to, like, be something else. Yeah, this version of his father that he's presenting as, like, having been motivated by loving England or this sort of traditional Englishness doesn't really hold up. So he doesn't say this in this book, but elsewhere in his in biographies of him, I found when Roger Scruton got into Cambridge and told his father this, his father stopped talking to him.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, like, everything else I could find indicated to me that, like, he actually was just a Chad Marxist, and Roger Scruton needs him to be, like, not that, because he has, like, severe daddy issues he still hasn't figured out.
I mean, there's, like, a few different directions this could have gone in, but what you're saying is not that Roger Scruton himself actually thinks that Britain ought to belong to the Anglo-Saxon peasantry of 1,000 years ago, and he's projecting this belief onto his father in order to reconcile it with his own beliefs. What you're saying is that actually he's accusing his father of this just to discredit him as a leftist, basically.
Not quite. I actually think that he does kind of believe that, and he wants to believe that his father was, like, noble in the way that he needed him to be, as opposed to actually just a Marxist. He talks a bit more about his father that I think actually explains this in the next excerpt.
Okay. His father is blood and soil in order to give him some nobility. There was another side to my father's character, however, and this too greatly influenced me. Robert Conquest once announced 3 laws of politics, the first of which says that everyone is right-wing in the matters he knows about. Alright, well... My father perfectly illustrated this law. He knew about the countryside, about local history, about the old ways of living, working, and building. He studied the villages around High Wycombe where we lived, and the history and architecture of the town. And through knowing about these matters, he became, in respect of them, an ardent conservative. Here were good things that he wished to conserve. He urged others to join in his campaign to protect High Wycombe and its villages from destruction, threatened as they were by the unscrupulous tactics of developers and motorway fanatics. He founded the High Wycombe Society, gathered signatures for petitions, and gradually raised the consciousness of our town to the point where it made a serious and lasting effort to conserve itself. I shared his love of the countryside and of the old ways of building. I believed as he did that the modernist styles of architecture that were desecrating our town were also destroying its social fabric. And I saw, for the first time in my life, that it is always right to conserve things when worse things are proposed in their place. That a priori law of practical reason is also the truth in conservatism.
So he's trying to say that, like, secretly his father was really a conservative. And so even though he was, like, a committed Marxist who organized his, like, neighbors against the upper class, like, even though he did all these things and he stopped talking to Roger when Roger started going to Cambridge, like, secretly he actually was a conservative.
Yeah, you see, my dad was actually a conservative because he wanted to conserve the ability of working class people to survive the depredations of the rich.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, I mean, this stuff about architecture...
Yeah, I'm not at all convinced that his father is, like, on the right side if his positions are accurately described. But whatever. I also very clearly don't trust Richard Scruton's characterization here.
Yeah, it's really funny. And the architecture thing actually is, like, a huge bugbear for Scruton. Like, his whole life, he's obsessed with, like, classical architecture and the dangers of modernist architecture and how it decays society.
If this guy were a poster today, he would definitely have, like, a Greek statue avatar.
Oh, absolutely. Do you know what the Grenfell disaster was?
That's when the public housing building that was shoddily constructed in order to save money went up in flames.
Yeah, many people died. He basically said that it wouldn't have happened if the building weren't so ugly.
Oh, what a fucking scumbag, man.
Like he really had this, like, obsession with, like, and we'll see it, you know, later in his book, but this obsession with, like, beauty and the importance of, like, good architecture. Okay. Oh, this thing about the 3 laws. So I looked up this guy, Robert Conquest, which is just, like, an incredible name. Like,
absolutely amazing.
Yeah. His other 2 laws, which are explained in a footnote: any organization not explicitly right-wing becomes left-wing in the end, and the simplest way to explain the behavior of any bureaucratic organization is to assume that it is controlled by a cabal of its enemies. So it's the kind of thing that are just, like, they're just, like, bon mot. They're not, like, actual laws or political analysis. It's just, like, a thing that you would, like, repeat, like, these, like, thought-terminating cliches.
I mean, well, what he's proposing there is that the deep state is responsible for society's ills.
Yeah. In this, like, fun little, like, the 3 laws of politics, right? And it's just, like...
Okay,
yeah.
Alright, whatever, man. Really encapsulating the conservative inability to take responsibility for failure right there.
Yeah, so he's got another bit about his father that I'm not going to send the whole excerpt, but he talks about how at the heart of his father's socialism was, like, a really deep conservative instinct, right? More of the same thing.
I can't get over that guy's name being Robert Conquest. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's really funny.
He looks like a mole rat, too.
So... he talks about, like, his father was, you know, committed to class war, but really it was because he loved England underneath it, and he loved the paintings of, you know, various English painters and the home service and all these different things. And
this guy has real daddy issues.
Yeah. He fully bore out the picture of the English working class that had been painted by George Orwell in The Lion and the Unicorn. When the chips are down, Orwell argued, our workers do not defend their class but their country. And he talks about, you know, Orwell talked about country and a gentle way of life and all these things, and they want nothing to do with a self-vaunting disloyalty that only intellectuals can afford. So Scruton loves Orwell. He's constantly talking about Orwell and quoting Orwell, right? It just comes up all the time.
I'm aware that you are not a huge Orwell fan.
Yeah. There's a very high chance that we do a future episode about George Orwell. He kind of sucked. But...
he does... He does kind of dine out a lot these days on the whole Spanish Civil War thing.
Yeah. So, okay. He studies philosophy at Cambridge. He spends a couple years in Paris. He's in Paris in 1968, and this is where he gets like really radicalized against Marxists. We'll probably go into the details of 1968 more in a future episode where it's more relevant. But basically, there were some huge protests, largely led by students in 1968. And Scruton's version of events is that, like, oh, these Marxists just wanted to burn everything down. And I understood that, like, actually, this is a nihilistic philosophy of destruction. And that's when I became a conservative and wanted to, like, save Western civilization. So this was, like, a real turning point for him. Then he gets back to England. He finishes his PhD in philosophy in 1973 at Cambridge. He starts working at this college called Birkbeck College, largely catered to people who also had full-time jobs. So he taught mostly evening classes. And he has this little aside in there about, like, where you can really see that he's like, oh, I knew I was going to be a martyr from the beginning, basically. He's like, I understood that I would soon need another career, so I started reading to prepare to enter the bar.
Oh my god.
Yeah, so he starts studying law.
Get over yourself, dude. I had already started nailing myself to the cross.
Exactly.
Reading for the bar and studying the English law as it was before the pollution injected by the European courts, and before the constitutional changes haphazardly introduced by Tony Blair, I was granted a completely different vision of our society. Common law justice spoke to me of a community built from below, through the guarantee offered by the courts to all who came before them with clean hands. This vision stayed with me thereafter as a narrative of home. In the English law, there are valid statutes and leading cases that date from the 13th century, and progressive people would regard this as an absurdity. For me, it was proof that the English law is the property of the English people, not the weapon of their rulers. That thought is not one that you will find in the history books of Hobsbawm.
But yeah, Hobsbawm was this English guy, socialist, basically, that he was railing on in the previous paragraphs.
He was railing Hobsbawm?
Railing about Hobsbawm.
Like the homosexuals in Proust, I was railing Hobsbawm. So, is this guy just like the Lindy Man? Is that what's going on here?
There's like a lot of Lindy Man stuff.
Okay, now you have to explain who the Lindy Man is.
Yeah, so the Lindy Man is someone that I introduced Sarah to, who we've been I desperately want to do an episode, but his books are all like self-published and like not available anywhere. If anyone has a copy of any of the Lindy Man's books, please send them to me. But he's this guy who's obsessed with this thing called the Lindy Rule, which I forget where it originated, but it was this like just folk theory that originated, named after this diner or this restaurant that like comedy managers would hang out in, called Lindy's, where they basically said, if you want to know how much longer a comedian's career is going to last, it probably, everyone's probably in the middle of their career. So if somebody has done like 20 shows or been on Letterman 20 times, like they'll probably be on Letterman another 20 times. And if they've been on Letterman only once, like probably only once more. And it's basically this idea that things that have lasted for a reason. And so for things that aren't consumable, you can figure out how much longer they're going to last by looking at how long they've been around. The Lindy Man is just a dude who's like used to be on Twitter. I guess he's still on Twitter.
And he's still on Twitter.
Yeah. He just like posts about whether various things are Lindy or not. And he just like decides whether like something is like good or bad based on like, did the ancient Romans do it? And it's like, he's in a lot of ways just the same as every other like statue avatar guy. But there's this like added like pseudo science layer to it.
He's constantly writing like Substack posts about like the Lindy effect and like organizing things according to Lindy principles. And it's just like his entire understanding of the universe is like, is this Lindy or is this not Lindy?
Yeah.
I have been trying to get a copy of the book Women in the Lindy Effect, like so hard. I made a fucking catfish account on X, okay? I just picked some like random stock photo model off of Amazon. And I was like messaging him like, oh, I'm really interested in your book, Women in the Lindy Effect. And he has not replied.
Damn. That's too bad. Yeah, this is like a very similar thing. And there's a lot in Scruton's writing, which is basically just that. Like, his whole thing is like, we want to conserve things, so things that have lasted for a while have lasted for a reason. And it's only stupid Marxists who want to burn things down. And if you were like a proper, rational person, you'd want to preserve things of value. Other thing to point out here is this like little jab at the European courts. So this came out in 2014. He was like very pro-Brexit. But I think even in 2014, this was like seen as like a long shot or like a fringe campaign. But there's all these points in this book where he does argue that like being in the European Union is a mistake.
This is like a perpetual bugbear of conservatives, just this concept of like international law and international solidarity. And, of course it's because they're nationalists. But like, they hate that shit. The Bush administration famously did everything it could to undermine the UN, which is kind of like a farcical goal considering how weak the UN is anyway and was already. But anyway, they just hate this concept of accountability for people at the top of the hierarchy that they value most, which is the national hierarchy.
Yeah, well, it's funny because he's phrasing that dislike of accountability for the people at the top of the hierarchy by saying that really it's about supporting people at the bottom, right? Like, society should be bottom up, and that's what conservatism really is this like grassroots thing. And it's like totally incoherent.
Yeah, I don't buy it for a second.
Another funny part of this, like, he starts talking about politics in the 70s and this sense that conservatism was really in decline even before like the post-war consensus conservatives were giving up. And he's got this quick little aside where he refers to the old guard of the Tory party had joined in the scapegoating of Enoch Powell.
Oh my God.
The only one among them who had publicly dissented from the post-war consensus.
Oh my God. Okay, so to recap our Enoch Powell episode, which the listener might enjoy going back to listen to if they haven't already. He was like a super racist who believed himself to be a brave truth teller, but it was actually just kind of like a fall guy for other conservatives. It was his job to go out there and throw himself off the political cliff in order to get the message of like racism and immigration restriction out into the public sphere where it could be discussed and where it could multiply and eventually like infect the entire political system. He was a sacrifice. He was a scapegoat from the start. That was his role.
So I read this and I was like, okay, I gotta Google like what else has Roger Scruton said about Enoch Powell, and he was a huge Enoch Powell supporter. He like owned like a hunting jacket or something that belonged to Enoch Powell, which he like proudly wore like fox hunting.
Jesus, dude. Dude, he has way more forbidden shit in his closet at home. He's got a fucking sliding panel, and it opens into a room with all kinds of leather shit.
There's this like long line of like weird conservative racists who are all like obsessed with each other. Okay. He then talks about Thatcher's rise. He spends a bunch of time like in Czechoslovakia, like helping out dissidents.
Okay.
And like fighting like communist authoritarianism. He, I don't want to say like uncritical support of everything that happened in like the Soviet Union and like under Stalinism, and that like everything in Czechoslovakia was chill. But later in his life, like soon before he died, he got a medal from Viktor Orban. So that gives you like a sense of like the kinds of circles he was really running in.
Yeah.
But this thing where he like went to Czechoslovakia, this is really where he establishes a lot of his like conservative street cred. Like other conservatives love him and they're constantly bringing up like he fought the communists. He was a staunch anti-communist. So then he comes back to England and he sees this like what he described as a growing socialist consensus, which is like this like the tiniest move towards like any kind of social justice or equality like in England, right? Like, and here's what he has to say about it.
The conflicts in which I became involved over the ensuing years brought home to me just how low the level of public debate had sunk in Britain. On the left, there seemed to be no response to the enormous changes introduced by mass immigration, except to describe everyone who attempted to discuss the matter as a racist. This crime resembled the crime of being an émigré in revolutionary France or a bourgeois in Lenin's Russia. The accusation was proof of guilt. And yet, nobody ever told us what the crime consisted in. I was reminded of Defoe's comment at the time of the Popery Act of 1698. Shut the fuck up. That the streets of London are full of stout fellows prepared to fight to the death against popery, without knowing whether it be a man or a horse. I was the more astonished to discover that this elementary intellectual defect had entirely invaded the political science departments of our universities, and that the intellectual world was in a fever about the presence among us of, quote, racists, end quote, whose conspiracy could never be discovered and whose nature could never be clearly defined. Being classed as a racist gave me a faint intimation of what it has been like in other times to belong to some despised and persecuted minority. I'm getting so mad. After a particularly frightening episode in which I was chased from a public lecture in the University of York and following libels by the BBC and the Observer, I decided to leave the academic world and live by my wits. Okay. So much going on here.
Yeah.
Shall I try and just take it linearly from the top? I mean, this is crazy. So, first off, he's doing the thing where he's like, oh, I'm being persecuted for my conservative beliefs. And it's like, what beliefs? And he's like, oh, you know the ones.
Yeah, he's literally doing that, right?
Nobody can define them, but, just normal beliefs that I have that aren't racist. They're definitely not racist. And then, he's like, oh, this gave me the slightest hint of what it must have been like to be a persecuted minority in another time when those existed.
Yeah, and he's talking about, England in the 80s. He's talking...
And he's talking about papists since 1698.
Yeah. But this is all happening in England in the 80s, a time of, quite a lot of racism, growing anti-immigrant racism. Also, a huge amount of, homophobia, and, God, they're,
This was an era in which there were actual persecuted minorities.
Yes.
Something he knows
today.
Quite well, but he certainly doesn't want to acknowledge because he's a massive fucking racist.
Yeah.
Also, he's doing the Barry Weiss here. He's doing Barry Weiss.
Yeah.
He's like, I was canceled, and it's time for me to go into the world and live by my wits, despite the persecution the institutions, the noble institutions I once belonged to, have subjected me to. It's so sad, and all of you wealthy patrons out there should give me lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of money to write about this forever. Yeah. Also, the fact that he just dances around and never makes clear what exactly he was canceled for, it's gonna be bad.
Yeah. So I don't really know what he meant by after this I decided to leave the academic world and live by my wits. There were a bunch of different situations where people protested him because he was constantly saying really outlandish shit. But he continued to teach at Birkbeck College through the 90s.
Wait, so he didn't even quit the job that he's pretending he got hounded out of?
Exactly. I think he sort of stepped, he took on fewer responsibilities at the university. He was kind of an adjunct teacher instead of a professor.
Oh my God, at least Barry Weiss actually quit.
Yeah, exactly. The other funny thing is that around this time, I later found out, so he was actually a full-on grifter in the sense that throughout the 90s, he was writing all these articles about how tobacco wasn't as bad as people were saying. And, basically, it's huge government overreach to ban tobacco. And then it was revealed that the entire time...
He was being secretly paid by tobacco companies?
He was being paid by Japan Tobacco International. And it got leaked. It got found out because an email leaked in which he emailed them asking them for more money. Because he was like, I'm still more, I'm providing, I'm still cheaper than, a PR firm. And, I'm providing value to you. And people were like, dude, you, this is a huge scandal. And he was like, no, the real scandal is that you guys are reading my private emails. Like, but he's just like a total fraud and a grifter. Like, yeah.
Dude, that's so funny. That's so funny.
Okay, so that's the end of my
I wonder why
journey.
intellectuals can't stand guys like this.
Yeah.
Did you ever find out what the libels by the BBC and the Observer were?
I mean, I think just that he was called a racist and a homophobe.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So, okay. So that's my journey. So then we get into starting from home.
Oh my god, that was just chapter 1.
That was just chapter 1.
Holy shit.
I think that's the one with the most excerpts from it, because the rest of these, it's pretty repetitive. This book is like 500 pages long in my like e-reader copy, and I read all of it, and it was not worth it. It was so bad.
Helen, why do we keep doing episodes about these terrible 300 to 500 page books? What are we thinking?
So
I guess that's not true. Sometimes we watch movies. Sometimes we watch 3-hour long movies, like The Dark Knight Returns.
God. What a terrible movie. Okay, so starting from home is really like a defense of like Burkean conservatism and nationalism, essentially.
Okay.
He is really against the French Revolution, like for the same reasons Burke was, right? So we get
I'm
this
getting
again.
used to this.
Yeah. So here's a fun little excerpt.
We are not built on the model of Homo economicus, the rational chooser who acts always to maximize his own utility at whatever cost to the rest of us. We are subject to motives that we do not necessarily understand and which can be displayed in terms of utilities and preference orderings only by misrepresenting them. These motives make war on our circumstantial desires. Some of them, the fear of the dark, the revulsion toward incest, the impulse to cling to the mother, are adaptations that lie deeper than reason. Others, guilt, shame, the love of beauty, the sense of justice, arise from reason itself, and reflect the web of interpersonal relations and understandings through which we situate ourselves as free subjects in a community of others like ourselves. That's so many words to say virtually nothing.
Yeah.
At both levels, the instinctive and the personal, the capacity for sacrifice arises, in the one case as a blind attachment, and the other case as a sense of responsibility to others and to the moral way of life. The error of reducing political order to the operations of the market parallels the error of revolutionary socialism in reducing politics to a plan. In his reflections on the French Revolution, Edmund Burke argued against the geometrical politics, as he called it, of the French revolutionaries, a politics that proposed a rational goal and a collective procedure for achieving it, and which mobilized the whole of society behind the resulting program. Burke saw society as an association of the dead, the living and the unborn. Its binding principle is not contract, but something more akin to love.
I think a couple notable things here. As you say, he's very verbose. I've tried to keep some of the other excerpts shorter, but I did want to just get a sense of like, he loves his own like eloquence.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He's very like, he's definitely substituting big words for actual thought.
Yeah. He's he's literally doing the Bill Maher thing, right? Like this is exactly, yeah. And then a criticism he's gotten repeatedly from, I think, people who make valid criticisms of him are he doesn't seem to understand, like, differences between things he disagrees with. He has this, like, very, like, either you are correct and conservative like me, or you are, in error. And, like, all versions of being in error are, like, sort of fundamentally the same, right? This analogy he's drawing between, like, rational, this sort of homo economicus, this idea of like human beings as rational economic agents, and revolutionary socialism, it just makes no sense. Like,
he's just trying to tar them both with the same brush as technocratic.
Yeah.
That's what he's going for there.
But if you take at face value what he's saying with this idea of like geometric politics, he literally just means like engaging in discourse at all is a trap. Like you just can't have conversations about things if you're actually like engaging in argument, right?
Yeah, a politics that proposed a rational goal and a collective procedure for achieving it, and which mobilized the whole of society behind the resulting program. Oh, the horror.
Yeah, like that could be bad. It could be good, right? Depends what the goal is, depends what the plan is, right? You have to get into specifics. You can't just say like everyone who has any kind of plan is wrong. It just doesn't make any sense because he also has a plan. He also has a thing he thinks society is for. He just thinks that it's more natural. He just thinks that it's the correct one.
Yeah, exactly. He's for nature. He's for the land. He's for the people who have inherited this place.
Yeah.
And therefore, he's against the elites.
Yeah.
That's all that's going on with this guy, I feel like, is he is fully embedded in and committed to the interests of elite society, and he is trying so hard to portray himself as on the common man's side, as against elitism, while advancing their interests and attacking the concept of common goals. It's a parody of conservatism.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. But he just like fully believes it, right?
Yeah.
And here again, he goes on a whole thing about like the importance of, when society is organized from above, either by top-down government or revolutionary dictatorship or bureaucracy, right? Accountability disappears and top-down government breeds irresponsible individuals, right? So he's really trying to frame this as like, he is for the common man, he is for bottom-up government, and that means conservatism, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's starting from home. Then we got the truth in nationalism. So fundamentally, he just thinks we need a national identity to hold society together. This is why he loved Enoch Powell, right? Like if you did listen to our Enoch Powell episode, you'll know what I'm talking about. If not, like Enoch Powell was all about like being English is about English cultural and English cultural inheritance. And we need to be able to say like, these white people who live around me are English, and all these other people who are coming in and flooding our country are not English. It has to be okay to say that. We have to be able to defend our culture.
That's right. We have to be able to defend our white neighbors. We have to be able to defend the white race and continue I'm sorry, I'm going on at length.
Yeah,
I really should have just boiled it down to 14 words.
Yeah. So he talks about how, the land is important, territory is important, but then he has... This was a really telling moment in the book that kind of made me realize something that's really going on here.
Of almost equal importance are the history and customs through which that territory has been settled. There are rituals and customs that occur here and which bind neighbors together in a shared sense of home. These rituals and customs may include religious services, but these are by no means essential, and are open to reinterpretation when it is necessary to include some neighbor who does not share our faith. Increasingly, therefore, the stories and customs of the homeland are secular. The stories may not be literally true. They may include large areas of myth, like the stories that the French tell about Jeanne d'Arc, about the Bastille, and about the Revolution, or the stories that the Scots tell about Robert the Bruce and about the Jacobite rebellions. These stories are the product of shared loyalty and not the producer of them. The loyalty does not come about because the stories are believed. The stories are believed because the loyalty needs them. And the stories change to accommodate the changing first-person plural of the people. They are, as Plato put it, noble lies, literal falsehoods expressing emotional truths. A rational being will see through them, but nevertheless respect them, as he respects religious convictions that he does not share, and the heroes of other nations.
So, he's basically admitting that, like, he doesn't really care about the truth.
Yeah. Myths, or you might say lies, that serve the cause of national coherence are fine.
Yeah.
And if you happen to see through them, if you happen to be like, wait, I think this Roger guy is just lying to me. Like,
Yeah.
just roll with it. It's fine.
Yeah.
Don't be such a bitch about it.
And so, I had originally planned to excerpt a bunch of like specific historical claims he makes that are not true, but I think it's actually an error even. Like, he's doing the thing that Sartre talks about, like, never believe that the anti-Semite, like, believes the, like, ridiculousness of his own statements. Like, he's saying, like, yeah, of course I don't believe the ridiculousness of my own statements.
Like, you think I'm obliged to take these words seriously?
Yeah, exactly. So he then has, like, he, like, jacks himself off for a long time about how, like, even more important than the majority is the person who disagrees with the majority, and, like, the political dissident is the ultimate hero culturally, which also doesn't make sense with the whole earlier thing about national coherence. Like, it's totally... It makes no sense. Okay. Now we're going to really start to get into some...
I've been canceled, by the way. I've been canceled. I just want to let you know I'm actually heroic. I'm so fucking brave for this.
Yeah. So, at this point, he's hinted at it a little bit earlier in the book, and I just didn't clip it, but we really start to get some of the other dimensions of odium that this book is going to have. Oh, so just to context here, he's talking about, like, the law as coming from this national identity, this sense that you're going to obey the law because you are a member of the nation, and why that's important.
Okay. There is another and deeper reason for adhering to the nation as the source of legal obligation. Only when the law derives from national sovereignty can it adapt to the changing conditions of the people. We see this clearly in the futile attempt of modern Islamic states to live by the Sharia. The original schools of Islamic jurisprudence, which arose in the wake of the Prophet's reign in Medina, permitted jurists to adapt the revealed law to the changing needs of society by a process of reflection known as, I apologize for mispronouncing this, ijtihad, or effort. But this seems to have been brought to an end during the 8th century of our era, when it was maintained by the then dominant theological school that all important matters had been settled, and that the gate of ijtihad is closed. This seemed to be the only way to conserve the authority of God's absolute and eternal decrees in the face of human deviousness and backsliding. Hence today, when the clerics take over, law is referred back to precepts designed for the government of a long since vanished community. Jurists have great difficulty in adapting such a law to the life of modern people. To put the point in a nutshell, secular law adapts, religious law endures. Moreover, precisely because the Sharia has not adapted, nobody really knows what it says. Does it tell us to stone adulterers to death? Some say yes, some say no. Does it tell us that investing money at interest is in every case forbidden? Some say yes, some say no. When God makes the laws become as mysterious as God is. When we make the laws and make them for our purposes, we can be certain what they mean. The only question then is, who are we? And in modern conditions, the nation is the answer to that question, an answer without which we are all at sea. Oh, this is such bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of layers of bullshit.
So, first off, I absolutely cannot comment on what he's saying about, like, the history of Islamic jurisprudence and, like, how true that is. I don't believe it, but, like, I don't have enough information to straight up contradict him on that.
I mean, I think the only important thing really to say there is that this vision of, like, the Islamic world, as he wants to think about it, as, like, being trapped in the 8th century or 9th century, as opposed to religious fundamentalism being a product of modernity and all these other material forces, is just, again, a lie that is, like, being used to strengthen his vision of national coherence, and it's just not connected to history, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, like, I mean, he told us that he was going to feel free to lie about it, and that, like, if you happen to see through it, that would be fine. So, like, what's the point of, like, fact-checking him here, really? But also, like, wasn't he talking earlier about how such a beautiful and important thing about the laws, how it comes from the common experience of people from the fucking 1300s in England? Like,
yeah.
That was his whole thing.
Yeah, so this is one of these classic, like, every accusation is a confession things. This is actually how he thinks culture, not only the law, but culture in general should work, right? His whole thing is like new things are bad, right? Modernist architecture is bad, right?
He was talking about society as a pact between the living and the long since dead.
Yeah.
And now he's like, oh, yeah, the problem with Islam is that you get laws that are developed for a long since vanished community.
Yeah, and he's talking about like, oh, secular law knows how to adapt and all these things. It's just...
He doesn't want secular law to adapt.
Yeah. God. Okay. So that's the truth in nationalism, which is just that we should be nationalists. The truth in socialism, I only have one excerpt from it because he just rails against socialists for a long time.
Okay.
The like little crumb that he says is basically what you said, which is like, we should try to make people's lives better. Right? But then he's like, but the socialists are totally wrong about how to do that. And yeah, again, he engages in some pretty bad history.
The Russian October Revolution did not target Kerensky's government only. It targeted the successful, those who had made a go of things so as to stand out among their contemporaries. In every field, in every institution, those at the top were identified, expropriated, murdered, or sent into exile, with Lenin personally overseeing the removal of those whom he judged to be the best. This, according to the zero-sum fallacy, was the way to improve the condition of the remainder. Stalin's targeting of the kulaks, the property-owning peasants, exemplified the same cast of mind, as did Hitler's targeting of the Jews, whose privileges and property had in Nazi eyes been purchased at the cost of the German working class. The explosion of anti-bourgeois sentiment in post-war France, leading to works like Sartre's Saint-Genet and Simone de Beauvoir's Second Sex, followed the same logic and was incorporated into the philosophy of the soyant huitards.
Yeah, so again, like, everyone he doesn't like is the same. There's no space between Jean-Paul Sartre, Stalin, and Hitler, right? It's a totally, like, confused version of history, right? Going after people who, like, doing class war and trying to actually redistribute wealth is the same thing as scapegoating Jews and committing genocide. There's just nothing there.
I'm fascinated by this invocation of, quote, the zero-sum fallacy, because, like, it's such an important thing to conservatism, actually, to convince you that society is zero-sum and that actually you need to be the oppressor in order to avoid being the oppressed.
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing. Again, I think part of his product of saying he's really on the common man's side, he actually turns that around entirely and says that the whole problem with socialism is that it's zero-sum.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
That could not be further from the truth.
Right? I mean, there is like this sense of like, oh, the socialists want to redistribute everything, but they don't realize that, like, instead of trying to redistribute everything, you can just let everyone be successful and it's not zero-sum. Like, I've heard this argument before. I think it's stupid, but it's...
Yeah, the rising tide lifts all boats. Shit.
Exactly. So then we get to the truth in capitalism. I've got a little bit more here because, as you can imagine, he's got more to say about capitalism and he basically supports it.
When is he getting to the truth in cigarettes? When is that happening?
That already happened. He's already been canceled for that, so he can't go back to that well.
The term capitalism entered European languages through the writings of the French utopian philosopher Saint-Simon. It was picked up by Marx to denote the institutionalized private ownership of the means of production. Marx contrasted capitalism with other economic systems, notably with slavery, feudalism, and socialism, and predicted that just as capitalism had overthrown feudalism in a violent revolution, so would capitalism be overthrown by socialism. In due course, socialism would wither away to leave the full communism that lies at the end of history. The theory is unbelievable, its predictions false, and its legacy appalling. Nevertheless, its terms changed the language of political debate in the 19th century, and we are now stuck with them. The word capitalism is still used to describe any economy based on private property and free exchange. And the term socialism is still used to denote the various attempts to limit, control, or replace some aspect of capitalism so understood. In all its appearances, therefore, capitalism, like socialism, is a matter of degree. It is important to be aware of terms that have been inherited from dead theories. Oh, he hates dead theories, unless they come from 1300s Englanders.
Yeah.
They may have an aura of authority, but they also distort our perceptions and weigh down our consciousness with newspeak of the kind so brilliantly satirized by George Orwell in 1984. Orwell's point in writing that book was to show that the dehumanizing jargon of Marxism produces also a dehumanized world in which people become abstractions and truth is merely an instrument in the hands of power. And the point should never be forgotten by conservatives who need to escape from the 19th century theories that sought to make their position not just obsolete, but also, in some way, inexpressible. We need to look at the world afresh, using the natural language of human relations. Oh, God forbid that language be deployed at the behest of the powerful. Ooh, Japanese cigarette company, would you please send me a little more money? I'm cheaper than a PR firm.
Yeah. But also, okay, there's a bunch of things going on here, right? He needs to deny that capitalism exists. Why? Because he supports capitalism. But fundamental to his whole thing is that ideology is bad.
I see.
He
so capitalism has to be an ideology which is free of ideology.
Exactly.
It has to be completely unmarked. It has to be a default that you're not even allowed to perceive.
Yeah, so we need to look at the world afresh using the natural language of human relations is like, we're going to do all of capitalism, but I'm going to pretend that there's no ideology.
We need to do newspeak to get rid of the idea of capitalism.
Yeah.
It should just be what is.
Exactly. He does have some critiques, as we saw earlier, of this free market kind of neoliberalism. So he does want to make some critiques of the free market. He does talk about how, like, Marx and Marxist theory were, like, totally disproved by the Austrian economists von Mises and Hayek. He talked about the price mechanism. There's definitely some future episode subjects in which we'll get into, like, Hayek and von Mises. I'm, like, also in the middle of some books about those guys right now. And these guys are, like, really influential for a lot of conservatives today. Like, cryptocurrency guys love this kind of thing, right? Because they were obsessed with this idea that, like, in a free market, price is actually the carrier of, like, this distributed information that really, right? There's, like, this, like, epistemological claim being made, and it's all just, like, totally garbage. But Scruton kind of loves that stuff and says, if you don't take it too far and say that, like, people are entirely, like, economically self-interested, like, there's a lot of truth to what these guys were saying. So, okay. So what is his objection?
It is at this point, however, that conservatives may wish to enter a note of caution. Although Hayek may be right in believing that the free market and traditional morality are both forms of spontaneous order, and both to be justified epistemically, it does not follow that the two will not conflict. Socialists are not alone in pointing to the corrosive effects of markets on the forms of human settlement, or in emphasizing the distinction between things with a value and things with a price. Indeed, many of the traditions to which conservatives are most attached can be understood from the point of view of Hayek's evolutionary rationality, as devices for rescuing human life from the market. Traditional sexual morality, for example, which insists on the sanctity of the human person, the sacramental character of marriage, and the sinfulness of sex outside the vow of love, is, seen from a Hayekian perspective, a way of taking sex off the market, of refusing it the status of a commodity and ring-fencing it against exchange. This practice has an evident social function. It's so evident that we don't even need to mention it. But it is a function that can be fulfilled only if people see sex as a realm of intrinsic values and sexual prohibitions as absolute commands. In all societies, religion, which emerges spontaneously, is connected to such ideas of non-negotiable order. To put the matter succinctly, that is sacred which does not have a price. And a concern for the priceless and the non-exchangeable is exactly what defines the conservative view of society, as I described it in Chapter 2.
So the problem with free market capitalism is that it's not homophobic enough.
Oh, that's where we're going with
Yeah,
this.
like that's basically what he's saying here, right? Like, oh, if everything is the free market and if everyone is like rational economic decider, how do we uphold traditional sexual morality?
It's so funny because he's like almost quoting part of the Communist Manifesto here.
Yeah.
He's talking about like how capitalism takes these like things with an aura of mystery and of sacredness and just like devalues them and destroys them, except like the communists are mostly like, okay, I mean, like that's not necessarily bad, like you're destroying the relationship between like a serf and his master, and that's like pretty cool, but you're replacing it with other forms of oppression, and that's really bad. And he's like, okay, no, the forms of oppression, those are the things we need to protect.
Yeah.
Those are the things we need to keep around.
But yeah, there is this like way in which these perspectives overlap. But he just like, yeah, he wants to save the values of like homophobia and serfdom. We get to the truth in liberalism. The truth in liberalism is basically individual freedom is important, but he's against liberalism. He basically goes on a whole thing, again, lots of which I even agree with, just coming at it from exactly the opposite side, which is that like the social contract model of society is kind of incoherent. Like, yeah, I would say that that's actually true to a large extent.
Okay.
Like, whatever. But the wrap-up of the chapter is kind of interesting. Or interesting for us to look at, not actually good.
Christ's parable of the Good Samaritan imposes a huge moral burden on us all. But to transfer this moral burden to the state, to say that it is for the state to transform that moral duty into a right of the recipient, and a right, moreover, against the state, and therefore against society as a whole, is to take a large step away from the original liberal idea of a state founded on the sovereignty of the individual. Oh, what happened to classical liberalism? Oh, God, I'm so sick of hearing that shit. It is to move towards the new idea of a society ordered by an overarching morality, which may have little or nothing to do with the way people live. Judges and human rights courts therefore play with an abstract calculus of legal privileges, while passing the cost of their judgments to others with whom they have no connection. And nobody knows whether that cost can really be borne. It is this fact that is giving rise in Britain to a growing discontent with human rights, and especially with the decisions of the foreign court tasked with inventing and imposing them. At the same time, instead of limiting the power of the state, alleged human rights have begun to enhance that power, and to bring the state into all our disputes on the side of the favored party. Rights, which for the liberal are the sine qua non of peaceful politics, become thereby a declaration of war on the majority culture. The majority culture, of course, being all these conservatives.
Yeah.
Who quietly agree with him.
Yeah. The silent majority.
That's right, so to speak.
Yeah, it's also really funny because suddenly this, like, heroism of the dissident is gone, right? Like, anything which goes against the majority culture is, like, an offense. Yeah, he just, like, really is obsessed with this idea that, like, the concept of human rights has gone too far, and things like the right to healthcare, or, like, the right to marriage equality, or the right to all these different things are actually impositions on the rest of us, as opposed to, like...
You can't legislate morality, guys.
Yeah, there's this, like, he goes through a whole thing about, like, the difference between, like, negative and positive rights, and, like, the nature of the obligations entailed by rights, and, like, a lot of it is just, like, quite boring, but... Yeah.
I mean, this is just, like... this is so incoherent. Like, I know perfectly well that a guy like this is totally in favor of legislating morality.
repeatedly he will see like the laws that are legislating morality as like not laws. So he's against marriage equality, right? He thinks it's good to have a law which says gay people cannot get married, but that's not a law. That's just not extending the state construction of marriage to gay people, right? But that's just like total sophistry to make a distinction between those two things and be like one of those is positive, one of those is negative. And by the way, I didn't...
Total bullshit.
It's not in this book, and I didn't clip it here, but he did actually say, like, in an article around the time when gay marriage was legalized in the UK, that gay people shouldn't be allowed to get married because, like, gay people can't have children, and marriage is about, like, reproducing society, and gay people aren't invested in society, right? So, like,
Okay.
yeah, he's all for legislating morality. He just doesn't think that that's what it is.
I'm also fascinated by he goes on this like long blather about the original liberal idea of a state, blah 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 blah, and then he's like, now all of this is giving rise in Britain to discontent with human rights. No, it isn't.
Well,
I'm not saying that like discontent with human rights isn't rising, but it's definitely not coming from this sort of like abstract blather that he's talking about.
yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important that, like, we are recording this at a time when the UK is seriously talking about withdrawing from the European Commission on Human Rights over, like, not being able to immiserate transgender people enough.
Right. It's like very concrete desires to oppress that are like motivating.
Yeah, he is part of this
contempt for human rights.
He is part of this conservative project. God. Okay. Are you ready to hear about the truth in multiculturalism?
I think I know what it is.
Okay.
And the reality is that not having multiculturalism is actually essential for maintaining the coherence of a national identity, for binding people into their communities, and for keeping the original idea of a nation and its traditions alive.
Yeah. Like, literally, yes. He's got a little more to say. So he does want to say that, like, other cultures have something of value, right? So here we go.
Well, that's big of him. The Enlightenment vision of human nature was based on the idea that human beings everywhere enjoy the same reasoning powers, and that these powers lead of their own accord toward a common morality and a common repertoire of passions. Works of art from the European Enlightenment took as their subject matter other cultures, other countries, and other climes, so as expressly to profile the shared humanity of the different peoples of the world. Examples like Montesquieu's Letters Parseines, Lessing's Nathan der Wijs, Mozart's Die Anführung à du Sommeil, Macpherson's Ossian Poems, Goth's Westerlijke Diwan, and 1,000 lesser creations remind us of the immense curiosity that grew in European and American society towards the varieties of human experience and community. Oh god, that was so tedious and Krauthammer-esque for him to just like rattle off this list of works of like capital G, great capital A arts.
Yeah.
And it is thanks to the work of Western anthropologists in the 19th century that we know so much about the way human beings are before technology, science, and the knowledge of modern life impinge upon them. The long-term effect of this has been to open Western societies to immigration, and to impart an ideal of citizenship that, it is hoped, will enable people of disparate origins and backgrounds to live together, recognizing that the real source of their obligations lies not in that which divides them, race and religion in particular, but in that which unites them: territory, good government, the day-to-day routines of neighborliness, the institutions of civil society, and the workings of the law. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And that is what we must expect. And if it is to work, it will be thanks to the effort on both sides to integrate the new arrivals into the surrounding way of life, so that the common culture of citizenship adapts to include them. The effort on both sides. You know, if you take the contrapositive, it seems to suggest that one side must have failed if things aren't going so great.
Exactly. I
wonder which side he's going to pick.
Yeah. It's also just like, right, it's It's incredible to list all these like Western cultural products as your evidence that the West values any other cultural products, right? Like, he's like, look, we understand that, you know, the people from the East, right? The people from the Orient, like, have cultural knowledge to teach us, and we have them, you know, we can see that in Goethe's Vestuslicher Divan, right?
Even the French can make art.
Yeah.
Like, we recognize that. We're quite open-minded.
And it's like, yeah, you're really not painting the utopian multiculturalism that you are pretending to here.
Oh my god. This reminds me of rationalists saying things like, oh, we have all kinds of people at our conferences. We have like philosophers, mathematicians, physicists, computer scientists, like just all the same type of people over and over.
Yeah. And then immediately to like say, and this is what's led to like immigration, and you know, it's fine for, you know, Orientalist tropes to enter into our media, but we don't want the people, right? Like, it's just such a like horrid view of the world.
Look, as long as they stay on their side of the ocean, they can send us all the anime they want.
So then he starts talking about multiculturalism and postmodernism kind of in the same breath, right? This is where he really gets into like the ultimate cultural relativism of the Marxist university, blah, blah, blah.
Nietzsche is a favorite, since he made the point explicitly. There are no truths, he wrote, only interpretations. Either what Nietzsche said is true, in which case it is not true, since there are no truths, or it is false. But it is only from the standpoint of the Enlightenment that this response seems like a refutation. The new curriculum is in the business of marginalizing refutation, just as it marginalizes truth. This explains the appeal of those recent thinkers, Michel Foucault, Jacques Derrida, and Richard Rorty, who owe their intellectual eminence not to their arguments, but to their role in giving authority to the rejection of authority, and to their absolute commitment to the impossibility of absolute commitments. In each of them you find the view that truth, objectivity, value, or meaning are chimerical, and that all we can have, and all we need to have, is the warm security of our own opinion. Hence, it is in vain to argue against the new authorities. No argument, however rational, can counter the massive will to believe that captures their normal readers. After all, a rational argument assumes precisely what they put in question, namely, the possibility of rational argument. Each of them owes his reputation to a kind of religious faith in the relativity of all opinions, including this one, for this is the faith on which a new form of membership is founded, a first-person plural of denial. Oh, God. It's just all the same shit over and over, man.
Yeah. So, I was given the opportunity here by him actually mentioning Michel Foucault, Jacques Derrida, Richard Rorty to go on a big tangent.
Do your thing.
But I'm just not going to, because it just doesn't matter. He's not engaging with it on any like serious level. The one thing that I think is worth pointing out here is all these guys were huge nerds about culture and actually valuing sort of our cultural inheritance, just not in the totally like fascist way that he insists upon, right? Like, he's saying that like Derrida wants to destroy authority and meaning and value, but actually, you know, I've talked a bunch on this podcast before, and I think most of it's actually been cut, but I just don't need to go into another rant about like Derrida was actually hugely concerned with like preserving value. But one of the things that makes Derrida very hard to read is that he constantly cites like the entire Western canon. Like, you read Derrida and he's constantly referencing like Aristotle and Rousseau, but right, just like every philosopher who's ever written, and you get this sense that like he has read everything. And so it's really hard to, if you actually like read that and confront it, like square that with this notion of somebody who like doesn't give a shit about any authority and just wants to destroy all value. Like, that's just not true. It's just that like he's not jacking himself off about it the way that Roger Scruton is. Mm-hmm. And to that point, there have been like almost no citations in this book up to now. That continues to be the case. Roger Scruton, as like a philosopher, he just like never cites anyone. Like, none of these arguments are backed up. There's no citations. this whole, for all that he wants to say about rational argument and presenting a rational argument, right? It's convenient in his view that like there's no point in making a rational argument because he actually never bothers to. Yeah, it's.
What's happening is his readership has this image of like a bomb-throwing anarchist who doesn't give a fuck about anything and just wants to burn the whole town down. And what he wants to communicate is that all the people who are like, hey, maybe you should think about shit for a half second, are just an intellectual version of that guy.
Yeah.
So you don't have to take him seriously.
Helen here. I am about to reference a conversation that was hosted by the British organization Intelligence Squared between Roger Scruton and the Marxist literary theorist and philosopher Terry Eagleton. I had explained this conversation already, it brought it up and introduced it earlier in the recording to Sarah, but that part of the conversation got very digressive and ultimately didn't really contribute to the episode very much, so it was cut.
So one of the big conflicts that he and Terry Eagleton have on this conversation that I mentioned earlier, and he talks at length about this elsewhere, is he thinks that Marxists suck also because they're constantly trying to historicize everything. They're trying to destroy values by putting them in historical context to understand where they came from. And it's such a weird claim because it's like, one of those doesn't necessarily entail the other, right? And Eagleton's entire response is just repeatedly say like, no, historicizing something doesn't mean destroying it, right? It just means like understanding where it came from. And somebody actually asks, like an audience question to Scruton is like, okay, you're against this like materialist discourse of like the origin of values. Like what's the right-wing response? Is there a conservative theory of value that would like tell you where values come from? And he basically has no answer. His answer is like, well, it wouldn't be the kind of like historicizing Marxism. It would be, basically just saying, oh, these things are values because they're good. There's like a wisdom in value. But there's no ability to ever explain what the thing is that is conveyed by the value, right? Like,
well, I would simply pick the correct values.
Yeah, exactly. Like, everyone else believes in orthodoxies. I believe in values, right? And it's like... it's just such an empty, nihilistic view of the world, right? Because you can't actually have a conversation. What is the point of talking about anything?
Which is... there's projection right there. That's exactly what he's accusing Michel Foucault et al.
Exactly.
Of doing.
So, okay, the next one is the truth in environmentalism. I didn't clip any of this. Basically, the truth in environmentalism is we should protect the environment. He has already talked about the problems with capitalism earlier, being that it tends to externalize costs, that if you can push your costs out to other people, you can avoid paying them, and that this is bad because it destroys things, and we're destroying the environment in this way. But he barely gets that out before he then starts talking about how, like, the screeching progressives are so annoying and they're alienating everyone. It's just, yeah. Then we get to the truth in internationalism. This is where he really, like, his pro-Brexit agenda really becomes clear. He wants to say, like, top-down government is bad, right? He said this before. And so, like, an internationalist government, like the European Union, is, like, even more top-down than a nationalist one. So it's, like, even worse, right? He makes a really startling claim at one point that I think is worth getting into, so...
One instance of this deserves mention, since it is a major contribution to the loss of security in Europe. The Geneva Convention on Refugees and Asylum was ratified in 1951, when there were no refugees uncatered for in Europe, and very few applicants for asylum, a fact which meant that there was no cost involved in ratifying the convention. This has bound the legislators of the nation-states ever since, despite radically changed circumstances. The convention enables dictators to export their opponents without earning the bad name that comes from killing them. The entire cost of the convention is therefore borne by the law-abiding states. An uneasy silence has so far prevailed concerning this, one of the most important issues facing modern Europe. Many of those claiming asylum bring with them the Islamist frenzies of the countries from which they have escaped. Some claim the benefits of citizenship, even sue for them as human rights, while acknowledging no duty to the state in return. There are now British citizens engaged in a jihad against the British people, for whom the accusation of treason is as incomprehensible as the suggestion that there is treason on the moon. Should we not deal with this problem by consulting the national interest, rather than surrendering to a treaty signed before most of us were born? I'm getting sick of calling out this hypocrisy of this treaty was signed before most of us were born. Can we really treat it as valid? And this whole laws are good because they're fucking Lindy shit.
Well, the thing is that he doesn't like the treaty, right? He likes the old laws that come from English common law because those are under the purview of the people. That's bottom up. But a treaty is top down. He actually basically does address this, right?
Oh my god.
The thing, though, that I find shocking is this completely ahistorical account of the Treaty on Refugees and Asylum in 1951.
Right, talk about that.
Which was after World War II. There were many Jewish refugees who were turned away from other countries in Europe as well as from the US. There was famously a ship full of Jewish refugees that was turned back from the US to Germany, and most of the people on that ship died in the death camps. This idea that it was this easy thing to agree to that didn't have any cost, and not that it was the result of realizing the horrible atrocities that were committed. Then to add this idea that, you can export your opponents without earning the bad name that comes from killing them, and that you should have to pay the cost of killing your political opponents as opposed to making other nations pay the cost of rehousing them. It's such a disgusting and dehumanizing way of thinking about just all of these issues.
It also his discussion of the Geneva Convention here, I can't quite call it Holocaust denial, but he's certainly avoiding the question of Britain's treatment of Jewish refugees during World War II, and he's covering that up by wrapping it in a layer of Islamophobia.
I think it's a fun moment to talk about how in a bunch of the descriptions of his life in his pastoral English home, he liked to listen to a lot of classical music and opera. He was a big Wagner fan.
Oh,
he was specifically a huge fan of Wagner. He does talk about the Ring cycle in this book as a cultural product that was an important inheritance of the West.
Was he a big fan of Wagner's essays, say?
He doesn't say. Just he doesn't specifically say, right, that he liked the Rivers of Blood speech from Enoch Powell, but he lets you know that he was a big Enoch Powell fan, right?
Okay. If
there is no dog whistle left unblown in this book, right?
Oh my god. Also, I gotta say, European countries are responsible for quite a lot of the destabilization of the Middle East and of places that, refugees come to Europe from. And I think there actually is an element of truth in the claim that part of what makes Europeans so pissed about this is it does in fact make them pay some of the costs associated with the instability that they've introduced to countries. And by costs, maybe I should rephrase that. Do you know what I mean?
No, I think I know what you mean, but it is in their view a cost to have these immigrants, right? I do think that while I completely disagree with this framing, it is the framing that is happening in their mind, which is producing this resentment. I've been reading a bit and I'm trying to think about how to work it into a future episode, but specifically about this very ahistoric vision of specifically, and I talked a little bit about it earlier, but this, Islamist fundamentalism that is, because these places haven't moved forward into the modern age, as opposed to being very specifically a product of European imperialism.
Well, you have to understand that the fall of Constantinople is a tragedy which we are all still experiencing hundreds of years later.
Exactly. Okay, here's how he ends this chapter.
The cosmopolitan outlook of Marxism-Leninism justified the Soviet occupation of Eastern Europe for 40 years. The anti-national vision of the Islamists encouraged... What are we doing here? What? The anti-national vision of the Islamists encourages aspiring mujahideen to join those who are trying to impose Islamic government around the world, regardless of whether the local people consent to it. By contrast, powers that enter war in order to defend national territory need have only one intention, which is to withdraw from the conflict when the battle is won, as the Americans and their allies are currently trying to withdraw from Afghanistan. Such powers are in a position to recognize that the age of empire is over, and that conflict will cease only when nations, obedient to the will of their people, agree to the terms on which they can coexist. That is the direction in which conservatives wish the world to go, and one major obstacle is the internationalist desire to dissolve all borders and to govern the world from nowhere.
Like, look, we went into Afghanistan, we fixed the problems, right? But there's all these rootless cosmopolitans who are
Right.
floating around, whether it's the
feel like
Judeo-Bolsheviks or the Islamists, right? Like,
I feel like I just turned a corner and I got hit with intellectual paintballs from like 5 different directions. Like cosmopolitan outlook of Marxism-Leninism, encouraging occupation of Eastern Europe. By the way, we're talking about the Mujahideen now and also the invasion of Afghanistan.
I read 500 pages of this book, Sarah.
I'm kind of at a loss for words.
Yeah, there's kind of nothing to say, is there? It's just like...
No, you really can't tie an idea together from sentence to sentence.
can't.
I'm shocked.
You can't. So...
This is a conservative intellectual? This is one of their leading lights?
Well...
We're like 21 episodes into this podcast, and I'm just like shocked.
The bare bones of the idea to head off anyone who's like, okay, you're just clipping this excerpt. The argument he is trying to make, which I think is like a very shallow and bad one, is that the nation is an important concept. We shouldn't have, right, he's already talked at length about how we shouldn't have like free market neoliberalism and like the social contract, but we do need to have like national identity and cultural values. And then the extent to which like internationalism like can and should exist, it's that like nations can function as individuals and enter into treaties, but those should be much looser associations, and that there shouldn't be
international
order.
law.
Yeah, there shouldn't be a sense of international law. It should be like a recognition of like non-aggression, right? And like we should be able to like enter into, right? He's like, the social contract can exist at the international letter, but then it really has to be a social contract where nations can pull out at any time that they want to.
Mm-hmm.
And but
if
then
they
again,
need more living space, they need more living space. Okay?
Exactly.
We just have to acknowledge the reality of that.
Exactly. And he can't really identify the difference between Marxism and like religious fundamentalism, and he thinks that like the war in Afghanistan is almost over, right? This was written in 2014.
Oh my
there was
God.
Another 7 years of war in Afghanistan after this. Okay.
Well, I'm sure he suffered terrible reputational consequences for being so overtly wrong.
He continued to suffer reputational consequences, and then there would be this like reset and be like, oh, he's mellowed out now. And then this was in 2014.
Oh my God.
He had already suffered like waves and waves and waves of like people were protesting him, right? And then it would be like, oh, but he's, you know, he's matured, right? And then he would like publish some other odious piece of shit, right?
I kept thinking about this after the Anita Bryant episode, just like the excitement with which liberal media outlets greet the opportunity to like rehabilitate some piece of shit at the slightest excuse. Them being like, oh, Anita Bryant's changed. You can tell because here's her views on gay people now. And then she said like the exact same shit as before.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, it's really bad. So, okay. Now we get to the truth in conservatism. I clipped more of this because it's just really odious. Like, this is really...
Okay, I'm excited.
I think this might be the longest excerpt that I have for us.
If people are free to associate, then they can form long-standing institutions outside the control of the state. These institutions might confer advantages on their members in the form of knowledge, skills, networks of trust and goodwill. They will contribute to the stratification of society by offering those advantages selectively. For it is a law of association that to include is to exclude, and exclusion can hurt. Indeed, in no area does the tension between liberty and equality reveal itself more vividly than in this one. Free association leads naturally to discrimination, and the advocacy of non-discrimination leads naturally to top-down control. How do we choose the acceptable middle ground, and on whom do we confer the right to forbid us? The libertarians tell us that no one has a right to exercise this kind of control, and that it will always get into the wrong hands. The hands of those who most want to hurt us in directions that we least want to go. There is a truth in that, but it is not the whole truth. For we know that our liberties are diminished if our fellow citizens are excluded from exercising them. The privileges of social membership should not be withheld from people purely on grounds such as race or class that are irrelevant to their exercise. For this reason, most of us now accept that where discrimination brings with it an unacceptable penalty, as in contracts of employment and admission to schools and colleges, it is part of true civil liberty to prohibit the divisive forms of it. Okay, we're not done with the excerpt.
Yeah.
I'm gonna press on, but oh boy.
Yeah, so he's like, yeah, okay, I understand that. Right, some of this is good. Yeah, our liberties are diminished if our fellow citizens can't exercise them, right? We shouldn't discriminate against people for irrelevant things like race and class.
Yeah, and if we want to prevent that, then, we're gonna have to accept a little bit of top-down control at least.
Yeah, so how do we find the middle
to
ground?
make that happen?
So you ready to hear about the middle ground?
I do want to push back against his use of the word natural when he talks about discrimination. Of course, there's some quibbles here, but mostly I'm just I'm dreading where this is about to go. The question remains of the extent to which associations should be subject to this kind of control. The American Civil Rights Movement ended racial segregation in America, and decent people applaud the result. But the same people might be less happy to learn that the Catholic Church in Europe can no longer run adoption agencies for children in its care, since the Church's attitude to homosexual couples violates the non-discrimination clauses in European law. They may worry that similar clauses are beginning to impact on the activities of the Boy Scouts and church-based youth organizations in both Europe and America. Should we simply accept this as the price of real equality, or should we rather uphold the freedom to associate as we will and as our conscience requires of us? Oh, should we simply accept this, or should we boldly assert our right to bully gay children?
Yeah. Or bully gay parents who want to adopt children.
Yeah.
God.
The problem is illustrated by the history of all-male clubs in America. Men stand in need of the male bonding that enables them to make deals. What?
Yeah.
To compete peacefully and to form networks of enterprise and risk-taking that fill their lives with purpose while defusing the instinct to fight. Oh my god, he's doing fucking Evo Psych. Hence, they form clubs where they meet during the evenings over drinks and food and exchange whatever ripe or rowdy gossip takes the edge off their mutual competitiveness. What harm in that? A great harm, say the feminists, for the club becomes an arena of privilege, a place where deals are made and careers advanced, and the deals and careers are on offer only to members, and therefore only to men. Hence, the male club is an instrument of unfair discrimination of a sexist kind. Only if women are admitted to the club can its existence be reconciled with the demands of social justice. As a result of this argument, all male clubs have been made illegal in America, a fairly radical assault on free association and the name of an egalitarian principle. Helen, can I just ask you right now, are all male clubs illegal in America?
I don't think so.
I didn't think so. I was like, wait. Can I just burst in here and be like, that's not true. That's not true. Because what if it is?
So it seems somewhat complicated. There's some restrictions on the ability to not allow women into clubs if it's judged that, like, this is a sort of professional organization. But basically, the argument that he is trying to gloss here, which I think he's doing, like, a very bad faith gloss of, is that it was recognized that a lot of exclusion of women was happening by men getting together and making professional male-only societies.
Yeah, in other words, his description of the harm caused by these things
It's
from
just, like,
feminists
true.
is just, like, true.
Yeah.
It's just, like, accurate. And he's like, well, hang on. But we want to exclude the women. Like, it's important for us for evolutionary reasons, actually, because it curbs our aggression and it facilitates male bonding, which is, like, really important because otherwise we'll fight each other.
Yeah.
Like, you can't have an all-male golf club, so you're just gonna, like, fucking punch each other in the face in the parking lot? Is that what he's claiming is going to happen?
I can't do this on the pod, but here's a picture of Roger Scruton. Like, he is not getting into a fight.
God.
Like,
Dude.
imagine this guy, like, oh, I gotta have my
He looks like a
male...
licked ice cream cone.
He's gotta have his all-male club so he doesn't, his natural male aggression doesn't leak out and, like... God.
Dude, he looks like he's leaking, but it's not leaking aggression.
Completely wild characterization here, right? But it's okay. So what's the story he's telling? He's saying, look, when people want to get together, they're going to exclude, because when you have a club, it's excluding the non-members of that club. So what's the conservative reply to this? So he says, you might think, like, oh, discrimination, if you can show that it's unjust, right? Like, there's a question of justice here. You figure out whether discrimination is unjust, and then you dismantle discrimination in those cases. And he actually doesn't go with that answer. He says that's not quite the right answer. It's very libertarian, right? And he doesn't really want to be libertarian, he wants to be conservative. So he doesn't really like this libertarian answer. So he says, okay, so what is the point of this association? What is the point of society? Well, the point of society is to be like a kind of conversation.
Oh.
And he talks about, like, Hayek again and the conversational model of society.
Oh my God.
And so here's how he wraps this up.
If we are to propose conversation as our model of political order, therefore, we need to answer the questions. Conversation in what circumstances? Between whom? And of what kind? He's saying, like, you might have noticed that this conversational model of society is incoherent and stupid, so, like,
Yeah.
we need to, like, refine it into something usable. Okay. Conversations arise in human society even in the most instrumentalized of our interests and activities, and Aristotle helps us to see how the truth in conservatism morphs into another all-absorbing falsehood. Conservatives are right to emphasize free association as the root of civil society. But when free association becomes a shibboleth, when all forms of community are regarded as equally worthwhile, provided only that the participants consent to them, oh my God, then we lose sight of the distinction between associations in which people make no demands of each other and associations in which moral discipline grows between the participants and informs and transforms their lives. Okay, gotcha. Conversations in church count. Others don't.
Exactly.
The truth in conservatism depends on our recognition that free association is to be valued only if it is also a source of value. In other words, only if it is ordered towards fulfillment rather than mere utility or recreation. And the libertarian free-for-all, what is worst in human nature enjoys an equal chance with what is best, and discipline is repudiated as a meddlesome intrusion. Conservatism is the attempt to affirm that discipline and to build, in the space of free association, a lasting realm of value. Okay, so his objection to libertarianism is that it's too principled. And
Yeah, so his objection to libertarianism is, like, it's too hard to do homophobia again, right? It's too hard to, like, be a racist, which is, like, also funny because libertarians that I've known have had no problem also being homophobic and racist, but yeah,
there's no conflict between that and pedophilia, so... This is such nonsense, it's making me mad. We want to create a lasting realm of value. Okay, I mean, he knows exactly which values are good already. And he's just like, we need to recognize as worthy and important of protection those forms of conversation in which the values I like are affirmed, and then all the others can get like flushed down the shitter.
Yeah, I mean, he already has said that, like, you know, real historical facts don't matter, and the thing that matters is telling the right kinds of lies that are going to give social cohesion. So, in that context, conversation can't be about argument, because argument cares about facts again, right? Conversation is about affirming the correct values. So the next chapter is called Realms of Value.
Oh my god.
So,
oh my god. By the way, let me also point out that he's acting like some sort of like value is being built here, like it's being created, but like he doesn't like that either.
Yeah.
It's conservatism. The whole idea is to conserve what already exists. Like, you're not generating new concepts of value and introducing them to society and sinking them into them. Like, he hates that shit.
Yeah, so this whole section on Realms of Value, like, he knows what values he likes. It's just like another chapter of him jacking off about what the good values are and like the source of value, right? And you might think that, like, okay, he's been doing a lot of like trashing other ideologies, right? And so now he's gonna have a positive project. But really, like, no. Like, there is no like substance here. So here's what he has to say about the church.
It seems to me, therefore, that religious freedom is itself a legacy of the religion that has enjoyed precedence in the Western world, the faith for which the stranger and the brother have an equal claim. When that faith declines, as it has been declining during our time, there remains only the shell of the political order that grew from it. Many people hunger for the spiritual life, which that shell protected. Christianity provided that life. Islam cannot, in its present form, provide it, since it presses against the shell of secular law and threatens always to replace it with another law entirely, a law that seeks brotherhood and shared submission rather than neighborhood and mutual freedom. Such a law is directed against the otherness of others, rather than setting out to protect it. Christians are under an obligation to bear witness to their faith, but this does not mean inflicting their faith on other people or forcibly requiring them to adopt it. As the founder of the Christian faith showed, you bear witness not through triumphing over your rivals, but through submitting to their judgment. The Christian faith, as it understands itself today, does not demand that we silence its critics, or even that we forbid them to practice their faith.
Yeah, just total bullshit.
Yeah, complete nonsense. I mean, okay, first off, what is this metaphor of the shell? There remains only the shell of the political order that grew from Christianity. Islam presses against the shell of secular law. So I don't know, everything has like its little shell or whatever, and various things are pressing into like this shell or that shell. I don't really know what he's going for there. It seems totally incoherent. But also, like, conservatives love to do this thing that's like, I've analyzed Islam down to its constituent particles, and let me tell you, what it needs is a reformation. Like, they don't understand shit about Islam. They don't want to understand shit about Islam.
Yeah.
All they want to do is be like, this is like pre-modern in some sense. This is like barbaric in some sense.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's really compatible with our more enlightened, more forward ways where, you know, we've already done the work.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty crazy. And it's also pretty, like, ungrounded from reality to say Christianity doesn't require you to force your beliefs on others. Like, okay, like, maybe your particular text of whatever you found, like, the part where Jesus said, like, don't do that shit, right? But, like,
I mean, sure. Some denominations, I think even that is being too broad. Some, like, groups of Christians, like, do not feel that need, do not see it as an issue, and, like, don't, like, press their religion on other people. Okay, fine, but, like, when we look at Christianity as it is actually, like, expressed and practiced in many countries today, like, it very clearly does motivate this stuff. And you can say that it doesn't matter that, like, it does motivate this stuff because the principle of the thing is, like, is not oppressive, is not outreaching. But like the same person who makes that kind of argument is then going to point to like the authoritarian circumstances that prevail in many Islamic countries and be like, oh, see, this proves exactly my point, that like Islam is like backwards and bullshit.
Yeah, so that's what he had to say about religion. Here's what he has to say about the family, another realm of value.
I don't know, man. I think secularism is good. I think it's good for laws to be secular. That's my opinion.
Yeah, but his point is that secularism is actually an outgrowth of Christianity, right? Which doesn't make any sense.
Me insane.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
Ugh. Family law, oh my god. Family law grew from the desire to protect a specific form of domestic life, based on the lifelong union of one man and one woman. But once the state became involved in tying the bonds between people, it also, in response to radical reformers, played an equal, if not greater part in undoing them. Our laws against incest, bigamy, and child marriage reflect the belief that marriage, as defined by the state, is to be judged in terms of another and higher standard. But when marriage is rewritten as a contract between the partners, in which future generations have no voice, those laws lose their underlying rationale. Hence, by a series of almost unnoticed changes, allowing ever easier divorce and ever more blatant neglect of children, I assume that means not sending them to Sunday school or something, the state has overseen the gradual undoing of the marriage vow, to the point at which the advocacy of homosexual marriage seems not merely a logical consequence of all that has preceded it, but a manifest offer of equal treatment to a previously marginalized minority. Yeah, 'cause it is.
Yeah.
Western society has evolved in the matter of homosexual relations, accepting that way of life, and the right of the state to endorse it through civil partnerships. But the bond between husband and wife, like that between parent and child, has a moral nature that is not to be summarized in a free agreement. Conservatives especially resonate to the old rite of passage and wonder what business it is of the state finally to set it aside, with no clear mandate for doing so. And some are troubled by the shallow reasoning that has dominated the political discussions surrounding this move. Oh, how dare you talk about shallow reasoning, you stupid piece of shit. As though the idea of equality were enough to settle every question concerning the long-term destiny of human society. But if we ask ourselves, how is it that the advocacy of gay marriage has become an orthodoxy to which so many of our political leaders subscribe, we must surely acknowledge that intimidation has some part to play in the matter. Oh my god, express the slightest hesitation on this score, and someone will accuse you of, quote, homophobia, while others will organize to ensure that even if nothing else is known about your views, this at least will be notorious. Only someone with nothing to lose can venture to discuss the issue with the measure of circumspection that it invites, and politicians do not figure among the class of people with nothing to lose. Yet conservatives will recognize that the ordinary conscience will not find itself entirely at ease with change that overthrows social norms on which people have depended throughout recorded history. In this, as in so many things, people of conservative temperament look around for the person who will speak for them, and find only an embarrassed silence. Strident minorities, acting on the growing disposition to censor their opponents, ensure that the deeper the question, the more likely it is to be settled by shallow arguments. Helen, brave and dissenting unorthodox truth-tellers are being hunted by the gay mafia in today's society. That's what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, I wish, honestly.
Yeah. Oh my god. Someone should have put this guy down like a fucking dog.
Again, I mean, the use of orthodoxy to mean, like, value with which I disagree is, like, so annoying.
Helen, has it ever occurred to you that in some ways wokeness is much like a religion?
Like, he was just talking about the importance of, like, specifically, like, values that originate from the church, right? And now he's using orthodoxy as a slur.
Well, religion I do like is good, and
Yeah.
religion I don't like is bad.
Because
It all
it's
seems
like
quite
religion,
straightforward.
yeah.
Look, religion I don't like presses against the shell of the law of secularism which is left by Christianity, which also creates the shell, even though, okay, I don't know.
Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense. So then he's got another realm of value is work. He talks about like the importance of like fulfilling work and like the de-skilling of society because the university is full of quote junk degrees,
Oh my
like
God.
media studies,
Oh my god.
and that we need to like bring back like liberal arts. Like he actually doesn't like vocational. Actually, that's not quite true. He's like sort of he does criticize elsewhere like business school things like this that are like specifically like you're going to school to like specifically learn something to make money. But he's like, oh, like the liberal arts, we need to bring back like the tradition of like liberal arts universities and get rid of all these like new things like media studies, and then sort of under his breath, gender studies, African American study, right? Like all these things are just like, those are the junk degrees, right?
He wants to bring back old school anthropology,
Yeah.
which we know he's a big fan of. He's been reading all the great classics in that. David Starr Jordan.
And then he's got a bunch to say about art as well. That's another realm of value.
No. Oh my god. I think I know which art he likes. I think it's classical art. I think it's art which is informed by Western heritage, which is informed by Greco-Roman values, and art which is representational and not corrupted by postmodern influences.
Okay, what are the corrupted pieces of art? If you could name one of his like examples of bad art, what would you guess?
Oh my god, he's a Jew. No, actually, I'm gonna guess it's Pablo Picasso. So far as the critics and the wider culture were concerned, the pursuit of beauty was increasingly pushed to the margins of the artistic enterprise. Qualities like disruptiveness and immorality that previously signified aesthetic failure became marks of success, while the pursuit of beauty was regarded as a retreat from the real task of artistic creation, which is to challenge orthodoxy and to break free from conventional constraints. This process has been so normalized as to become a critical orthodoxy, prompting Arthur Danto in his Paul Carus lectures to argue that beauty is both deceptive as a goal and in some way antipathetic to the mission of modern art. Art has acquired another status and another social role. Indeed, it might seem that wherever beauty lies in wait for us, there arises a desire to preempt its appeal, to smother it with scenes of destruction. Hence the many works of contemporary art which rely on shocks administered to our failing faith in human nature, such as The Crucifix Pickled in Urine by Antonio Serra. Oh, you know what? I should have guessed about something like that, because that's exactly the sort of thing that Krauthammer would have gotten mad about.
Yeah.
Hence the scenes of cannibalism, dismemberment, and meaningless pain with which contemporary cinema abounds, with directors like Quentin Tarantino? That's the target of his ire? Quentin Tarantino?
Like Piss Christ and Quentin Tarantino.
Oh my god. Having little else in their emotional repertoire. Hence the invasion of pop music by words and rhythms that speak of unremitting violence, often rejecting melody, harmony, and every other device that make a bridge to the old world of song. And hence the music video, which has become an art form in itself, devoted to concentrating into the time span of a pop song some startling new account of moral chaos. Okay, I mean, there's a lot of old man yelling at cloud here.
Yeah.
But, like, I also can't help but notice that, like, his description of the invasion of pop music by words and rhythms that speak of unremitting violence could be interpreted to have a racial subtext.
Yeah. Like, there's quite a lot that, I mean, it's so repetitive. So there was so much that I cut because I was like, we already established this, right? But there's quite a lot of that. There's a point where he talks about, the beauty of classical architecture and how important it is compared to the, the ugly, exurbs of Detroit, right? Like, there's, like, quite a lot in here. Which, again, is actually not really a way of valuing art, right? Like, he doesn't actually think you should, like, engage with a work of art or, like, be transformed by it. And, like, even as I was prepping this episode, like, I was listening to some Beethoven string quartets. I don't know, like, I have, like, I can appreciate a lot of the classical art he talks about, but he doesn't really care about classical art or beauty, right? He just wants to rail against like new things and creating anything new, right? It's just and it'll all somehow
Kind
like
of
magically,
reactionary in the purest sense.
yeah, it will carry values and protect us, right? Like this is the guy who says that the reason Grenfell burned down is because the building was ugly, right? He doesn't actually think of beauty as like something real that like, I don't know, like that we engage with as people and we create new artworks, right? He thinks that it's this like magical ritual you perform where you build enough, you build enough arches or whatever, and then suddenly, you're living the good life or whatever, right? Like it's so stupid. So the last two chapters are Practical Matters and A Valediction Forbidding Mourning but Admitting Loss. I didn't clip any of those. There's nothing new. Basically, he just continues to say, like, conservatives want to conserve values. Values are important, but values are just like anything he likes. Anything he doesn't like is an orthodoxy. We've gone over this to death. There's more about he actually has a quote in here about how conservatives understand that underneath the quote fragile crust of society isn't the idol of Rousseau.
Oh my god, there's another layering concept here. We've had shells, we have crusts now.
He says that underneath the fragile crust of society isn't the idol of Rousseau, but the violent world of the hunter-gatherer. Right?
I see, okay.
So values
he's coming out as a Hobbesian.
Yeah, values are protecting us from this kind of threat of barbarism.
Right.
And yeah, like again, like completely ahistorical, like not, real anthropology at all. Like it's this just so story. But as we know, like he thinks that that's the whole purpose of culture, is to be like a collection of just so stories we tell ourselves. Okay.
A series of convenient little fictions, and you can see through them or not. It doesn't matter. The real point is that they're hegemonic enough that we can draw collective strength from them.
So the problem with this book is, upon finishing 500 pages of it, I realized I don't really know if it's meant to be read. I think it's actually just meant to be gotten mad about, or like, yeah, like I don't know that like this really matters at all. He was just like a guy who said shit, and he continued to say shit for his entire career.
Well, who's paying him?
Well, he just needs to the thing is that these books will like get enough of a readership, get enough of a circulation, because they'll cause a stir that like various publishers, like he gets book deals relatively easily. He like does seem to actually have some political influence, in the sense that in the 80s he starts a magazine called the Salisbury Review. It never gets a huge circulation, but it's acknowledged as like similar to what's the William F. Buckley one, the National Review. Like it's acknowledged as like a source of conservative ideas. In 2019, he did an interview with the New Statesman.
Okay.
That got him like canceled again.
Again?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
And it got him so canceled.
How many nails can you fit in one set of wrists?
Neil Ferguson actually wrote an article like sticking up for him and being like, we have to band together. Woke has gone too far.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
That's a real low point.
Yeah.
Being defended by Neil Ferguson.
Yeah, so I clipped some good parts from the interview. They ask him, like, do you think Brexit was a good idea? Like, now that Brexit has, like, gone to shit, right? This is 2019, so, like, it was pretty much accepted disaster. Do you think it is a good idea? They talk about that for a bit. They talk about the problem of, like, the Irish border, right? He has this kind of incoherent answer about, like, the importance to the Northern Irish and also to the Republic of Ireland of, like, the national identity of Ireland. And then he gets this really great passage.
When the Troubles occurred, Southern Ireland still was that strange entity described in Ulysses, which I'm rereading. A deeply Catholic country in which divorce was impossible, and abortion and all that, hadn't moved with the modern world. Oh man, he probably came so many times thinking about that. It wasn't the country which now has a Tisoc, who is a Hindu immigrant and a homosexual, who has brought about all these extraordinary changes. I'm not saying that those changes are necessarily right, but Ireland has jumped forward into the modern world in a way which I'm sure many of the Irish people themselves regret. But nevertheless, it's not that romantic thing that was so yearned for by the IRA. So could it be that this old conflict is now dwindling and disappearing? I don't know. Wow, really thoughtful, man.
Yeah. Like, oh, the Irish, like, they have a Hindu immigrant gay Tisoc now, like.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I'm not saying those
Can you
changes were right.
believe it? Those guys have a faggot in charge. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, he's...
Anyway, maybe things are different now. I don't know.
I love this, like, I'm not saying those changes are necessarily right. When you know what he means is, those changes are necessarily wrong.
Right.
Like...
Also being like, by the way, I'm rereading Ulysses. Not to brag.
Okay, and then I liked this part.
Interviewer. Are there any of the individual policies that you think have merit? Renationalization of public utilities or a higher tax for top earners? What's your view on those? Scruton. I do think, well, obviously as a railway user I get tempted by the idea of renationalizing the railways, partly because they seem to run quite well in places where they're nationalized.
He does then go on to say, like, oh, but there's a lot of strike power and it grinds the country of France to a halt, right? So he does hedge a little bit, but I just included this to be like, I thought everyone was right-wing in the things they know about, bitch. Like, you're saying that it's because you're a rail user that you support nationalization? What a fucking idiot. Okay. Okay, he gets asked about, like, homosexuality, and he's like, well, you know, I don't think I'm not a homophobe. Like, I don't think homosexuality... I've said repeatedly that it's not a perversion, in fact. I've repeatedly said it's not a perversion, right?
Well, how thoughtful.
But, you know, it's different, and I just talked about how homosexuals are different, and people get all mad, right?
You know what? I'm really glad to have him as an ally.
Yeah. And then he talks about how transgenderism is confusing children.
Oh, nice,
and
nice,
we should,
nice.
you know, oh, if a boy says he's a girl and you give him hormones and insist on and give him a new body, like when he regrets it, can you give him the old body back? No, you can't. So we should be a little careful about these things. Like, it's just so stupid.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So obviously he was just like staring down the scope at homosexuals, and he was like, okay, it's time to move these sites about a half inch to the left.
At one point, Margaret Thatcher, like, so there's this famous quote from Margaret Thatcher where she said to the Conservatives, like, the other side have got a philosophy they can test their policies against, and we have to have the same. And he's frequently been mentioned along with this as, like, providing that policy, right? And there's been groups that he started a member of, like, a think tank and this Salisbury Review and these other groups that were meant to, like, provide that policy. So they ask him, like, do you still agree with that? And his answer is literally no, because conservatism is not about ideology, it's about love. He comes right out and says, like, no, like, because we don't have an ideology, right? We just, like, it's about loving value, right? The other guys have ideologies. We don't have an ideology. He talks about, he's asked and talks about Islamophobia as a, quote, propaganda word, that Islamophobia doesn't exist, and it's just, like, something people say to shut you up from talking about, like, the dangerous immigrants who are flooding our countries. He's asked, what's your view of Viktor Orban? In which he is like, you know, it's complicated. Like, you know, he's got some good points about the Muslims, basically. Like,
it's complicated because it's unpopular to say that you like him.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay. He died in 2020. He was memorialized by basically just, like, fringe lunatics of the right wing. So I talked about Rod Dreher already. So for people who don't know, Rod Dreher is like a Twitter poster and has a Substack, and he wrote a book called The Benedict Option, which is basically about how, like, conservative Catholics need to, like, retreat from society and, like, live in the woods and, like, rebuild Catholic nationalism in these, like, homesteading kind of arrangements. He's very much an extremist and a fascist. He wrote this for the American Conservative. He wrote, like, a sort of in memoriam piece. And here's how he opens it.
Very, very sad to get the news that Sir Roger Scruton has died of cancer. Details yet to come, but I want to ask your prayers for him and for those who loved him. This past summer, my friend Laura and I visited him at his farmhouse in Wiltshire. I interviewed him for my forthcoming book about what the experience of resisting Soviet bloc communism has to teach us about resisting the soft totalitarianism emerging today. Sir Roger was strongly supportive of this book, telling me it was urgently important. I feel so humbled by his friendship and encouragement.
You couldn't even get, like, a full paragraph into your, like, memoriam of the guy before you're plugging your own book. Like, it's all grifters. All these guys, like, they claim to love each other, but, like, it's all about, like, oh, he loved my book, by the way. My book that's getting published later this year.
That reminds me of when, like, when Trump was asked about Charlie Kirk, this was like the day after his death or something. It was like, oh yeah, that sucks. We're building a ballroom over there. It's great.
Yeah. So there's like a longer piece right after this where he quotes Roger Scruton at length, and he quotes this interview he did with him, and he talks about how it was important to fight the communists, and now woke is rising, or he calls it still political correctness is rising, and it's much like communism, and right, blah, 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 all the stuff you could imagine we've already talked about, but I just loved that. Okay, so I want to close out. I've got basically a game and then some dessert for us, and then we're done. So I want to play a game of two truths and a lie.
Okay.
I'm going to give you 3 statements about Roger Scruton, one of which is a lie.
Okay.
He wrote a book that got him sued by the Pet Shop Boys. He got pulled over by a cop and gave him a facsimile copy of the Magna Carta as his driver's license. And he wrote a novel about a girl who gets groomed by a gang of immigrants, but whose teacher figures it out because of clues in her essay about Shakespeare's The Tempest.
Oh my god. This is impossible.
Yeah.
These are all true. You're tricking me.
So,
one of them
okay.
is actually a lie? Okay, then I'm gonna go with the Magna Carta.
Okay. So he wrote a book about music in which he said, like, basically electronic music is, like, not even music, and, like, the Pet Shop Boys are so bad that they, like, basically cannot be really said to write their own music. Mm-hmm. They sued, they won in court, the book got pulped.
Okay, rare W for UK libel laws.
It is the Magna Carta thing that was a lie. Here's from, another right-wing woman who...
See, it's too libertarian, the Magna Carta thing.
Well,
That's
so
how
here
I
we
knew.
go. So... One of the other people who wrote, like, a sort of in memoriam after he died is this woman, Christina Hoff Sommers, famous anti-feminist. She's published a bunch about how, like, the feminists are the real anti-women and, like, supporting traditional feminine, all these different things. But here is a clip.
During Roger's visits, we would go to concerts and lectures in my car. One evening, he volunteered to drive. We were pulled over for the victimless crime of my expired license plate. The officer asked for his driver's license. Helen, fuck you. Roger reached deep into his book bag, extracted a huge faded manuscript, and carefully unfolded it for the officer to review. It looked like the Magna Carta. The officer was stunned. You told me one of them was a lie. Sir, this is not a recognized license in the District of Columbia. Oh no, Roger politely replied. My village council assured me this was valid throughout the world. He threatened to arrest Roger on the spot, but Roger kept pointing to sections in his document that supported his case. The officer let us go in exasperation. Roger ever after held to his pastoral British license on U.S. highways, a living testament to the Anglo-American rule of law.
Okay, so it's unclear to me, like, she says it looked like the Magna Carta. It is just, like, some parchment. As far as I could tell, there was never a practice of, like, British village councils issuing these pastoral licenses on big pieces of parchment. Like, that's not a thing. And so I'm calling this one a lie because that didn't happen.
Yeah, no.
Like, this story did not happen, right?
Yeah, no, you're right.
It's, like, incredible that she's, like, telling this story. Like, I don't know what the actual story was, but, like, this didn't happen. So this is the lie.
Yeah, okay.
But it's not my
correct,
lie.
But it's not your lie. All right. Excellent work, Helen.
And then, of course, he did write the novel. It's called
Helen, this is so stupid. This is so stupid. Like, does Christina Hoff Sommers just, like, talk to Sovsits or something? Does she talk to sovereign citizens?
Like, I was pulled over for the victimless crime. Expired license plates.
And I cited the Magna Carta, and the officer was like, Sir, you have won the internet today.
Everybody clapped. And then... Yeah, the novel he wrote a couple novels, but the novel that I was referencing is called The Disappeared.
Okay.
And yeah, it's about, like, a gang of immigrants that, like, grooms a young English girl, but then her teacher helps, like, save her because she writes some essay about The Tempest that contains clues.
Oh my god.
The magazine was praised by Julie Bindel.
Oh my god.
who described it as both timely and brave.
Oh my god. Notorious racist turf.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So the dessert. In 1986, he wrote a book called On Sexual Desire.
No.
And like,
No, of course. Of course. I almost brought this up at
Yeah.
multiple points during this.
I could have done the whole episode just about this book because it's so wild, but that felt like shooting fish in a barrel. Like, of course, this like British conservative boomer has like weird stuff to say about sex. So I didn't want to make the whole episode about it, but I did pick out 2 particularly fun passages to share.
Oh.
So he's got a whole chapter on perversion.
Of course he's a fucking pervert.
And
of course he's a fucking pervert.
one of the sections on perversion is the section on homosexuality. Now, he is clear to say in the section that homosexuality isn't necessarily a perversion.
It just happens to be in the
Yeah.
perversion section.
Yeah, because he's talking about all these things that other people might consider perversions, and he wants to evaluate each one and whether it's actually a perversion.
Okay.
There is like an overarching like philosophical project in the book. It's like pretty incoherent. It's like this very shallow like pretend reading of Hegel that he does. It's not really worth getting into. But here's what he has to say about the difference between male and female homosexuals.
At the same time, it should be recognized that male and female homosexuality are significantly different, just as male and female desire are different. The need for a lasting partnership takes precedence in women's sentiments over the immediacy of sexual excitement, or rather, sexual excitement tends to be inseparable from the feeling of dependence, while the male impulse towards new encounters may lead to promiscuity on a remarkable scale. The flitting nature of Greek pederasty is beautifully conveyed by the poems included in Strato's Musa Purilis, and in particular by those of Meleager, who laments that his eyes, boy-hunting hounds, repeatedly betray his soul into the trap of Aphrodite. In his incomparable description of the sexual encounter between M. de Charlus and Jupian, Proust shows the dramatic reality of a desire which knows no inner constraint, while being subject to an immense outward interdiction. The 2 partners recognize each other's need immediately, observe only those proprieties that are necessary to conceal their mutual desire, accomplish their union, and separate, all the while entertaining towards each other an outlook of indifference, contempt, or at best, in Jupian's case, curiosity. The possibility of such an encounter is, I believe, enhanced by the sense that no barrier divides one from the sex of the other, that his desire is already intimately known and as ready for fulfillment as one's own. This, combined with the natural predatoriness of the male, interesting,
Yeah.
constitutes the danger inherent in male homosexuality, and is one of the major reasons for its traditional interdiction. It also partly explains the Greek attitude to male homosexuality. As the amphorae illustrate, the phallic component is uppermost in the appeal of the eromenos, a fact which is greatly relished by Sir Kenneth Dover in his trivializing book on the subject, and in one poem, Meleager delights in the vision of 5 boys ministering to a single throbbing penis. The case of female homosexuality is remarkably different, at least insofar as it has been sensitively recorded. There is not the same emphasis on the sexual organs and on the moment of sexual excitement. Instead, there is an extremely poignant, often helpless sense of being at another's mercy. The lesbian knows that she desires someone who will not typically make those advances that are characteristic of a man, even if she wants to. Nor can she make these advances herself without compromising the gender identity which, she wishes to believe, is integral to her own attractiveness. She can only wait and wish and pray to the gods with the troubled fervor captured by Sappho in her hymn to Aphrodite. Poi kolothron athenat Aphrodita.
Like,
I'm a little amazed by his background in the subject for someone who seems to know nothing.
But also his background is entirely like literature again.
Yeah,
right? Like
that's
he doesn't,
exactly.
There's like never.
And yet he seems to have read like quite a lot of literature on the topic.
Yeah.
And yet like he clearly has never actually spoken to a homosexual.
Yeah.
At least with knowledge.
Yeah. It's pretty wild. Okay. This is from the section. This is from the section on masturbation.
Thus, when masturbation intrudes into the sexual act, it has precisely that freezing character which turns us from perversion. Consider the woman who plays with her clitoris during the act of coition. Such a person affronts her lover with the obscene display of her body. What? Wait, what?
Yeah.
And in perceiving her thus, the lover perceives his own irrelevance. Oh, you child! She becomes disgusting to him, and his desire may be extinguished. The woman's desire is satisfied at the expense of her lover's, and no real union can be achieved between them. The incipient obscenity of masturbation threatens the intentionality of desire, and brings us constantly to the verge of perversion.
Yeah.
This fucking loser.
Yeah.
Are you kidding? Oh my god.
Like.
I'm just imagining his nasty cotton candy ass, like, just floating over a woman. And she reaches down to give herself, like, the tiniest bit of satisfaction as this, like, incompetent toad works what little magic he has. Yeah. And then he's like, ew, gross. What are you doing?
Yeah,
ew,
like,
that's perverse.
Someone's finally... He's gonna be the brave truth teller to speak out against the perversion of clitoral stimulation. Like,
oh
what a loser.
What a fucking loser.
Yeah, so I could have done the whole episode on that book, but, like, I don't know. It's just, there's nothing there. So, let's do FAG ratings.
Oh my god. Okay.
On this show, we use the world's most advanced system for the measurement of bigotry. We rate each of our subjects on a 3-part scale, with a number from 1 to 5 for each. In exceptional cases, we might go up to a 6 or down to a 0.
First, how ferocious are they?
Second, how arrogant are they?
Third, how gullible are they? For ferocity, I think he probably rates kind of low just because he's so fucking vague all the time.
Yeah, I don't want to grade him too low, because I think that, like, it is kind of that, like, he just knows what the limits are of, like, what to say out loud to ride that line of, like, guy who is out there but will continue to be employed. So, like, he makes sure to talk about how much he loves Enoch Powell, how much he loves Wagner, right? The importance of, like, traditional values. Like, I think he could be at a 3.
Okay, I can see a 3. That seems alright.
Arrogance has got to be quite high. Like, he's reaching Ayn Rand levels of, like, everything I believe is a natural value and everything anyone else believes is orthodoxy or ideology.
Oh, man.
Like, to arrive at Cambridge and be like, I was socially ostracized but spiritually at home, like, everyone could immediately see.
Yeah, like,
yeah.
He understands Cambridge to be, like, a place with which his glory is in accordance.
Yeah.
Is part of how I read that. Okay. I could see giving him a 4.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. He's, like, not... Yeah, there's still room to go up for sure.
Ayn Rand was a 6. I don't really agree that he's approaching Ayn Rand.
Yeah, I think he's just, like, on the same scale where he's, like, getting up there. But I would agree 4. Okay. Gullibility requires a little explanation. Each of our subjects has a role in the production of bigotry. A higher gullibility score means they are inhabiting that role without any awareness of doing so, while a low score means they're hyper-aware of their role. Okay, so I guess we should say, like, what is his role?
I think this guy is the one who most purely so far inhabits a role that I kind of had in mind when I started the podcast, which is there's a way you can conceive of a bunch of production of bigotry as the creation of a commodity. And it doesn't really matter what the quality is, it doesn't matter what the details of it are, it just matters that you get a sufficient quantity of the stuff because it needs to go out onto the market so that people can absorb it and use it to their own ideological ends. It's like paper clips. You know, you're not going to the store and being like, oh, I need premium paper clips. Somebody just has to be out there stamping the fucking paper clips.
Yeah.
And I think that is exactly what this guy does. He's a paperclip maker. And I think he is incredibly aware of that fact.
You know, that's the thing where, like, I think there is a part of him that really does believe that he is engaged in a project to actually, like, defend something real called conservatism. Like, I don't quite know if he really conceives of how empty his entire life was.
I don't know that he really cares.
Maybe. I think I'm going to give him a 3.
You're going to give him a 3. Okay. I'm going to give him a 1, but I was honestly tempted to give him a 0.
Okay. So we've both given him the combined FA score of 7, which is, like, quite bad. But yeah, that's Roger Scruton. Any closing thoughts?
Terrible experience. What a goddamn toad.
Yeah.
And to all the women who slept with him, I'm so sorry.
God.
At least it was probably over soon because you, like, made the wrong motion with your hands or some shit and he got pissy and ran out.
Yeah, God. All right.
Ugh, it disgusts me. What is this bestial thing you're doing? Sir Roger Scruton won't stand for that.
Right after the part on masturbation, he's got a section about chastity and how, like, people think of, like, chastity as a perversion, but really chastity is, like, the true, like, good life. Like, he's yeah, he had some issues. So,
Well, he's probably going to be the last conservative we examine who has some sort of, like, sexual hang-ups.
Yeah, but, I mean, very few of them write an entire book about it like that. So, I don't know. Anyway, goodbye.
All right, bye, guys.
There's really nothing real. There is no real. And that's what's called the postmodern mentality.
I couldn't resist the worst racist remark.
The adventure of life justifies its suffering.
I don't want to see him having political succubus with goblins.
Do it live.
Is Trump going to have babies with a goblin?
Do it live.
And turn against us like Darth Vader?
Do it live.
Now listen, you the queer, I'll
calling
slap
names
you in
and
your
let's get-
goddamn face, and you'll stay plastered.
I was going to have a guest speaker, but the person I had invited in died.
Some level of masochism.